One, two, three, testing.
Chris Tolley?
Hey, Chris, it's just Andy. I'm just calling again. I'm ready for the interview now. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So how much time do you have? Like 20 minutes or?
Yeah, I could probably do maybe like 15 if that's okay.
Yeah,
So
that's totally
go
okay.
ahead.
Yeah. So I have just really like 5 questions for you. So the first, do you mind if I also record this interview just to let you know I will be recording this. Just need your consent for that and stuff.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, that's great to hear. So please state your name for the record.
Sure. It's Chris. Last name's Tolley, and it's spelled Tolley.
And what's your background, Chris? What have you done in the past and stuff?
So I'm primarily an artist, a writer, and a director. I'm also the co-host of a CBC show called Play Me, and that's the audio drama program through the CBC. So most of my work has been through the arts. We've always had a strong component of social justice in the arts as well, which sort of naturally drew me to the Green Party. And I joined the Greens about 10 years ago, but I really became very involved after my first kid was born, my daughter.
Oh, that's great.
That really made me realize, that the future is really at stake right now, and the future is my kids, and it became very personal at that point.
So the first question I have, your party's all about the environment. So what is your party's environmental policy?
Yes, absolutely. Basically, other people have already done the work for us. It's particularly the IPCC report from the UN has outlined everything that needs to be done if we're going to stop climate change. So what our party has said is, look, we're just going to implement everything that the science and the research has said we need to do. So the first thing is having very clear targets. So our targets are a 60% reduction of greenhouse gases based on 2005 levels by 2030, and then zero by 2050. And those targets are what the IPCC have said we have to do if we're going to stop this crisis. So to do that, we're going to do a variety of things. One, immediately stop all subsidies of the tar sands and shift ourselves off of the fossil fuel industry. We're going to have only electric vehicles produced and sold by 2030, and all combustion engines gone by 2050. We're also going to bring in things like an aviation tax and a shipping tax that will slowly shift us away from those industries. We're also going to bring in a carbon tax that is a national carbon tax, not provincially based. And that carbon tax will increase based on what the science says it needs to, so hit the levels that it needs to hit. We're going to subsidize a just transition from the fossil fuel industry to the clean energy industry. So we make sure, and we also see this as, even though it's a crisis, as a tremendous opportunity, because things like our retrofit program. Oh, sorry, I'm just getting a call. I'm just going to bump them to voicemail.
It's okay, don't worry.
Sorry about that.
Totally okay.
So we're going to retrofit all buildings, both commercial and residential, and the trade unions have said that that's going to create alone 4 million jobs. So it's one of those things where it is a crisis, and we have to do big, bold things. But, as an example, our infrastructure is aging out, so we're going to have to replace that anyway. The question is, are we going to replace it with new technology that's going to move us forward, or are we just going to replace the existing technology just with the same thing, but just replacing it?
Okay, that's great. So the next question I have is in relation to electoral reform. So I understand your party is very passionate about that, and that's sort of become an issue for people, even with Justin Trudeau canceling it. I think it was 3 years ago. I understand that still is a very big issue for people. So what is your party's stance on electoral reform?
I believe incredibly passionately about electoral reform. In fact, I spoke as a witness to the parliamentary committee, the special parliamentary committee on electoral reform, and I also organized our riding's nonpartisan town hall and submission to the committee as well. I think we're voting through a very outdated system. It's a very old system that clearly doesn't work. And there's been a lot of research, and it's been implemented around the world at different levels of government, mixed member proportional, and it has done wonders and magic. I think for me, one of the biggest surprises is not only does it all of a sudden the legislature reflect the will of the people, but it also reflects the people, which is something that is really missing. When New Zealand brought in mixed member proportional, all of a sudden the percentage of Indigenous people was directly reflected in the percentage of Indigenous people in the legislature. Same with women. All of a sudden there was parity with women within power. People of color as well. All of a sudden the circle of power truly reflected the population. So you not only get all of a sudden the will of the people reflected, but you also get a true snapshot of the population.
Yeah, so the next question I have is related to Indigenous affairs. So what is your party going to do to make life better for Indigenous people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is one of our deep, deep shames as a country. And I think what we have to do is we have to, of course, it's insane that it's 2019 and we're talking about things as basic as clean water and livable housing. It's nuts that we're in this position. So we're, of course, going to focus on all those things. But even on a bigger picture, we're going to eliminate the Indian Act, which we feel is a racist act. It was a colonial act that was brought in by a colonial government and imposed on a people. And we need to eliminate that act and then renegotiate these laws as nation to nation, which is much more respectful and equal negotiations. So that's one thing that we'll do. There are also a lot of things, like, for instance, there have been a number of claims that have been settled, but the money hasn't been paid out because the funding, basically the purse strings, haven't been open. So we would immediately go through, and all the cases that have been fought and won for the Indigenous people, we will pay out. There are a number of things that we can do. And also, once again, this is another example of the work has already been done for us. If you look at the Truth and Reconciliation report, if you look at the UN Declaration for Indigenous People, if you look at the murdered and missing women and girls, Indigenous women and girls, there are tons of recommendations in all of these reports. And we're the only ones who have said, all right, we have to do this, and it's just simple. As people have done the work for us, they've said what needs to be done to right this wrong, and we just need the leadership to do it.
So the next question I have, so for Toronto Danforth, another really big issue has been sort of gun violence. So what is your party going to do to getting more guns off our street? What is your party's policy on guns?
Yeah, that's a great question. We see that there's absolutely no place for handguns or assault weapons in Canada. They serve no purpose outside of killing people. So we would have a buyback program that would take them out of the hands of people. But we also see things like at our border where we've got sort of this strange situation where we work so hard to keep people out of our country, where we should be focused on keeping things like guns out of our country. So we would refocus at the border what are sort of the priorities. But I also, I mentioned that my background is in the arts. I did an awful lot of work our company did through with gang-related and gang-involved youth. And it was incredible to see the power of the arts and sports in situations like this, where you can actually get kids before they get to the point where they have, when they're dealing with violence and guns. You can actually change that course. And it's incredibly powerful. And also on top of it, it's just really inexpensive. An arts program doesn't cost a lot of money when you compare to having a kid and the policing and then the court system and then incarceration incarceration, and then that kid's just going to come out of the system without having anything changed. And of course, you're just going to repeat the cycle. So arts programming, I think, is incredibly powerful.
That's great. So the next question I have is in relation to immigration and healthcare. So what is your party's immigration platform and healthcare platform? I'm sorry to squeeze that into two questions, but just trying to be aware of the time here. Yeah.
So immigration, we see immigration clearly as an asset to our country, not a threat. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to do is stop this attitude of immigration as a threat. One of our debates, we had one party, which I won't mention because we don't like to bash parties, but you can probably guess which party.
Guess, yeah.
Actually, we were talking about traffic, and they blamed our traffic woes on immigrants. And it's like, you can't blame immigration for being the reason you're late for work. It's ridiculous. So see immigration as an asset. We will do things like fast track and help accelerate accreditation. We have many people who are coming to our country who have incredible skills and are trained, but aren't able to apply their trade because they don't have the accreditation yet. And we understand sometimes there is, our country, we do have maybe slightly different regulations, et cetera. So there is a transition period, and people do have to make sure that their education matches and the understanding matches what we have in the country. But we can certainly speed that up because ultimately anybody who comes to our country wants to contribute. Like, that's why they're coming. So we have to make that as easy as possible. Also things like immigrants make 40% less than people who are on average, than people who are born in our country. And to me, that says that the system is broken. So what we have to do is we have to fund not-for-profit companies that help with the transition to new lives in our country. We also have to do whatever we can to make that transition as easy, because once again, people come to our country because they want to contribute, and we just have to make sure that we make the pathways as clear as possible so that they can. And as for healthcare, we see, obviously healthcare itself is a provincial matter, but there's a lot that we can do federally. And a perfect example is pharmacare program. We have a universal pharmacare program because quite often, the issues are sure, we can get the healthcare system that we need, but ultimately, if we need drugs, then we, that can't bankrupt us. So, and not everybody has a drug plan, but also we have a strong focus on preventive care and preventive medicine, because once again, what's the point of waiting until people get sick and then treat the illness when there's a lot that can be done, and it also ends up being a lot cheaper too if you can prevent the illness in the first place.
So the next question I have is in relation to affordable housing. So what is your party going to do to make housing more affordable in Canada?
Yeah, and that's particularly for Toronto Danforth. That's a huge problem that we have right now. And, we have two campaign managers, Chris and Jen, and Chris he's young, and he's looking at housing, and he's like, there's no way I can afford a house. There's no way I'll ever be able to afford a house. And that's just such a, so clearly shows the problem that we have right now, because I had an opportunity when I was his age that he's not going to have. So that's something that we definitely have to address. So we're looking at things like increasing the number of affordable housing units. We're going to add, I think it's $750 million to help build new units in Canada, and also $750 to help refurbish, because we do have some inventory that's on the market, but it's just not really livable. We're also going to focus on co-op housing, because once again, co-op housing, it really I think is a perfect example of how you can create housing that is affordable and also very high quality of life, and that there's a sense of connection and ownership to it. So we're going to also look at the financing rules for co-op housing, both between the people living there and also through the actual creation and building of it.
Okay.
Ultimately, our focus is on medium density because that's the best for livability and also the best for the environment as well.
The next question I have is in relation to, I can remember, it's in relation to, so foreign relations. What is your party's foreign policy sort of platform? Because that is an issue that matters to a lot of people when it comes to economic trade.
Yeah, absolutely. We feel that trade with other countries is what has built our economy. So we are not ideologically against it. The problem is a lot of the trade deals, particularly like the Pacific, the original Pacific trade deal, had elements in it that were very harmful to Canada. One of the big things was, that basically a lot of the Chinese corporations, which are closely and intimately connected to the Chinese government, would have the right to sue and work around environmental protection laws, which the Canadian companies have to play by, so they should as well. So we're not ideologically against free trade with other countries. We just want to make sure that the agreements that we have are fair and ultimately help build the quality of life for Canada. Beyond trade, if you want to look at defense, we see, we've got this huge border up north that's just not being protected, and we have to protect our sovereignty. But we also see a lot of the work that the Army is doing should be shifted from offensive to defensive. And also, we have, a climate emergency where, we're having to deal with floods and fires and, a lot of serious things. And I think the Army can play a very important role in protecting us that way as well.
That's great. So the next question I have is in relation to sort of the agricultural sector. So you have supply management. That's a really big part of our economy.
Yes.
So what is your party's stance on supply management? Are you in favor of it or are you against it?
We're in favor of it, and once again, none of this is ideological. We're going to look at each situation. Right now, with the dairy farmers, we see that it's helping an industry, and so we are in favor of it. But once again, it's not an ideological stance. We'll look at every situation independently.
And this will sort of be the last two questions that I have because I know we have to go very soon. The last question I have is in relation to Quebec and French language rights. So what is your party's stance on Quebec and dealing with Quebec sovereignty, but also protecting French language rights and sort of promoting it? What is your party's stance on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We see Quebec as a nation, and once again, has to be treated with the respect that you would treat a nation with. We see that particularly French language rights outside of Quebec always seems to be under attack, and as any minority, you have to fight to be able to protect those minority rights. So we work hard to look after that and to protect those rights. Once again, we are a bilingual nation, and that's something that is important to us, and two of the many nations that make up Canada.
And then the last question I have is in relation to multiculturalism, and then what would you do yourself to encourage young people to get more involved in politics?
Yeah, that's, I think, really important because you see half the people in our country, more than half, don't vote, and I don't blame them because I will go to the door and many people will say, the behavior that's happening. I don't trust politicians. They're liars and they misbehave. And I kind of have to go, yeah, you're right, because it's true.
Yeah.
And it's our responsibility to clean that up. So we really have to start to behave much more like adults. And I think that would make a big difference. And also just multicultural wise, once again, we need to be able to see the people and the population reflected in the people in power. I'm a white male, and I'll never see the world through different lenses because that's who I am. But my wife is a woman of